Before we get into the video, I do just want to apologize about the terrible audio. We just moved into our new house, so the recording room is basically just my desk, a few monitors, and the mic, so I do apologize for the echo. It will be fixed in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for sticking around, and let's get into the video. The most recent update in Fallout 76, the Gleaming Depths update, brought with it a huge amount of new content, including a whole host of new weapons. Some of them are amazing, and some of them are pretty trash, but I figured we should go over all of them eventually. So introducing the new raid weapon series, and the first episode I figured we would start off with my favorite out of the bunch, the Resolve Breaker. So get ready, we're about to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly about this new amazing launcher. Before we get into the actual testing of this weapon, let's talk about how you could obtain one of these bad boys for yourself. So, like I mentioned earlier, this gun was added with the Gleaming Depths update, and it can be only obtained during the raids, and specifically, it can be obtained during the raid stage 3. So unfortunately, you'll have to get somewhat far during the raid, and if you don't get the weapon or the plan, you gotta run it again. So if you can't run endgame content, you're unfortunately out of luck. But yes, this is a raid-specific weapon, and you could get it and the plan for it to drop from stage 3 of the raid. Now that you know how to get this bad boy, let's talk about the effects that this thing has, and hang on tight, it gets pretty crazy. So let's just do a rundown of the effects, and then I'll go ahead and talk about them a little bit more. So the first effect that this thing has is, of course, Bloodied, which is damage increases up to 95% as health decreases. It's basically been the meta for the game as soon as the game came out. Then we have Inertial, which then obviously replenishes 15 action points with each kill. We have Steadfast, which is plus 50% damage resistance while aiming. Unfortunately, that does not count. You actually do have to be aiming in. Next up, we have Electricians, which some people love, some people hate. I'm on the fence about it personally, but when reloading, emit a shockwave that stuns nearby enemies for 3 seconds, just like the Circuit Breaker. And then this gun also comes with 2-shot, which is plus 1 projectiles, plus 25% damage, minus 50% hipfire accuracy, plus 100% recoil. And then it has minus 10% durability, or minus 10 durability, launches cryo grenades that deal physical and cryo damage, attacks drain 10 action points per second for 10 seconds, just because it's cryo. And then finally, because it's a cryo gun, it reduces target's movement speed by 35% for 10 seconds. So, as you can tell, this thing is basically a god-tier, bloodied cryo 2-shot rocket launcher that replenishes AP with every single kill. Just like the Circuit Breaker, like I said earlier, it has that stupid little electric field when reloading. It doesn't really do too much damage from what I've noticed, but the stun is kind of nice. You can live without it, though, because this gun will stun everyone in terms of freezing them and making them do no damage and run extremely slow. So you don't really need that stun from the Electricians. It's kind of, in my opinion, a waste of the 4th perk slot, but it is what it is. But all of these effects synergize so well together. The 2-shot plus the Bloodied, that's a lot of damage that makes this thing actually usable in terms of dealing damage to bosses, not just tagging during events like the other grenade launchers in the game. And then obviously that cryo and the 2-shot and the fact that it's explosive, just insane. You'll basically be freezing everything on the map when you just shoot a magazine of this thing. Everything will be frozen, and you'll be able to stun lock larger enemies. So Bethesda really knocked this thing out of the park in terms of perks and synergy. It's seriously in my rotation for every day use. The damage plus the freezing just makes this so good in almost every scenario. And then just besides all of the effects that makes this thing so special, it does have this nice, sleek Enclave paint job that comes with pretty much all of the raid-specific weapons. It kind of has this Enclave look to it because that's the whole entire theme of the raid, and I love the way that the Enclave stuff looks in all of the Fallout, so I think they kind of hit it right over the head. I know when I do weapon reviews and unique weapon reviews in particular, I do talk about the way that the weapon looks, but that's because if you're going to be using it for a while, it might as well look okay, right? Not just be ugly, but obviously you can change the paint on this thing. And then more importantly, I correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please, but I think that this is the first cryo launcher to be introduced in Fallout 76 and in Fallout in general, I think. just in the entire series, I don't think that there's ever been another cryo-launcher, grenade launcher, or rocket launcher. So again, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But it works so well, and now let's get into the nitty-gritty and break this thing down in terms of testing and see what we could actually do with this thing. So let's start off with the lower level and weaker enemies and then move our way up to like nuke events and everything like that. So the lower level enemies, as you could see in the video, this thing just tears through most enemies against most basic mobs like the mole miners and ghouls and scores and everything like that. One grenade can wipe out a decent amount of them. It's actually laughable just because this thing is pretty bad on ammo and does so much damage. I wouldn't really suggest using it on these cannon fodder enemies. But you definitely can, and you'll destroy them quite literally. You won't have any issue just blasting through, like I said, any amount of ghouls or anything like that. So if you do have one of these things, and if you want to clear out a decent amount of lower level enemies first, like in Radiation Rumble or anything like that, this thing is perfect. You will be able to shoot your one grenade, which is actually two grenades because of the two-shot effect, and if you are bloodied, you'll just instantly destroy everything in the vicinity in terms of like lower level enemies. Now, moving on to those slightly tougher mobs, like those damn green bastards, the super mutants, this thing actually does completely fine. In the video, you could see that I one or two shot them successfully. One shot depending on the perks that you have. I only had one damage boosting perk, but on this character, at the time, I was running a slight bloody build. So you could clear Westek out like it's nothing with this thing. It's basically a cryo nuke launcher. The damage is crazy in terms of launchers, and it's because of that two shot. So you have kind of double the explosive spread, and then also the cryo. It's a literal flashbang. So you can't see anything, and then the enemies can't see anything. It's pretty fun to use. But as you can see in the footage, this thing has no problem against your tougher enemies like super mutants. It does great against high health enemies and high armor targets. So basically, if anything that you shoot with this thing, they will freeze. So any melee weapon, a super mutant that's running at you, you shoot them. Any of the hounds, you shoot them, they will freeze where they stand. And then the people that are the super mutants that are shooting at you, if you shoot them with this thing, if they don't die instantly, they will basically freeze to the point of not being able to really deal any damage to you. It's crazy because this launcher provides so much survivability and so much damage, as you could see in the footage. I'm just completely tearing through the super mutants, and then all the lower level enemies are really nothing. Now, moving on to those tougher enemies, those mini boss-like enemies like the Mirelurk Queen or the Super Mutant Behemoth, those are also no problem at all. They're not a one-shot, obviously, just because it doesn't do that much damage, but it just hold down the trigger, and after all the cryo mist clears, you'll see just a giant corpse in front of you of whatever mini boss you were trying to take down. The damage on this thing, since it is bloodied and it is two-shot, is really nice. You seriously can use it against every enemy in the entire game. Basically, it's really not a problem. As you can see in the footage here, it takes like a mag to take out basically both of these guys. So 10 shots, 20 shots if you're counting the extra grenade projectile and everything like that. So it's obviously not the best in terms of damage in the entire world. Like a railroad rifle could destroy a Mirelurk Queen significantly faster than this thing can. But if you wanted to run like a heavy only thing, and if you wanted to even run like a launcher only build for some odd reason because you're just bored, this is it. This is the go-to. This thing really can take down basically any mini boss or any enemy in the entire game. Scorchbeasts, Mirelurk Queens, Super Mutant Behemoths, Super Mutants, Ghouls, Mole Miners. This thing tears through every single one of them, as it should, because it's a fucking launcher. This thing actually finally feels right, and it's really nice. And then the final thing that I want to talk about in terms of testing is just how useful this thing is at the nuke events. So like I just said, the cryo effect just slows down all enemies, especially if they're huge, because it's just a bigger target for you to hit, and they have a wider hitbox to get hit by the AoE effect of the cryo explosions. So you can completely stun lock any of these bosses with just one of these resolve breakers in your hand and a couple of magazines. If you're going up against the Scorchbeast Queen, and if she lands and if you spray her down with this, she will not fly away. She will be crippled, and then she also will be frozen. You could stun lock him in place. You could completely freeze him. Neurological warfare is a walk in the park when the robots can't even move. This thing it should be a mandatory for some people at Nuke events. Normally, some people run around with like a cryo-launcher or like a cold shoulder or something like that, trying to like freeze and make sure that the Nuke event bosses can't really move. But this should be the go-to just because of how damaging it is, and then how easy it is to just freeze everything on the entire field. So Nuke events, mini bosses, any type of enemy, this thing does have it handled. Now that the testing is over with, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, like I mentioned, starting off with the good, or at least the biggest positives that come with this weapon, in my opinion. But I will just say this, it's not one of those positives on this list, but this gun really does look good, like I had mentioned earlier. I think that's important. This gun really does look good. Just all of the specific raid weapons do look really nice. But the first actual positive that I want to talk about is the synergy of this thing. Everyone loves a good synergizing weapon. Everyone loves synergy. It's the buzzword of the week. It's fantastic. I love it when a unique weapon has effects that actually work together and well with each other. That two-shot mix with the bloodied is a dream. That's literally how this thing is able to produce so much damage. It's just a great feeling knowing Bethesda can actually still make great unique weapons when they want to. And then this one little positive I wanted to kind of mention that goes hand in hand with the synergizing of this weapon is, again, the DPS. This thing has a above average DPS for all of the launchers, grenade and nuke and Fat Man and missile launchers in the entire game. You basically can use it on every scenario. You can't really go wrong with it being your go-to launcher. So it's good to see that Bethesda is putting a little bit of work into the kind of like underclassed weapons. The next thing that I want to talk about is probably the most obvious standout thing about this weapon, and that's going to be the cryo effect. I've talked about it a lot during this video, during the testing and everything like that, because it is such a forefront. Since this is an explosive weapon, the whole AoE pushes out that freezing effect, and it's just so useful and efficient. I don't think there's a more efficient freezing gun in the entire game. Don't get me wrong, the Pepper Shaker is great at keeping the Queen down, but that's not because of cryo, that's just because of the crippling effect. So this thing is amazing for freezing and for slowing down basically every single enemy. If you need a cryo weapon, this thing should be your go-to cryo weapon if you're in the end game, and especially if you're a heavy gunner. Which brings me to my next point. This thing is a top-tier event tagging weapon. Like I just said, this thing is perfect for events that require tagging or events that have a lot of mobs, like Eviction Notice, Radiation Rumble, or even something smaller like Uranium Fever. This thing just outshines all other tagging weapons because of that AoE explosion. It freezes so many enemies. It tags so many enemies because, again, it's a two-shot projectile. So one grenade can go one way, one grenade can go another way, and you're putting two AoEs on the map that's tagging a bunch of enemies, and it's so much more ammo cost efficient than a Fat Man or Overkill. I know that I said that it wasn't the best on ammo, but compared to one of those launchers or even a missile launcher, this thing is a godsend in terms of ammo. Finally, the last positive standout and probably the most important thing that I wanted to mention about this gun is just how damn fun it is. The ragdoll plus the cryo and the fact that it's a two-shot just makes this gun a literal and metaphorical blast to use. And yes, that pun was intended. If you're bored and want to spice up your daily playtime, go and do a few events or daily challenges while using this thing, just ragdolling every single ghoul and enemy that you see while they're a popsicle flying through the sky. It gives you a little bit of joy if you're a sociopath like the rest of us. So in terms of actual enjoyment, this gun ranks extremely high, and if you don't believe me, if you have one sitting in your stash, go and test it out for yourself. Every rose has its thorn, every yang has its yang, and every good has its bad. There are obviously some bad features that come with this weapon, so let's get into those. There's not many of them, but there are a few. The most obvious downside to this weapon would have to be how annoying it is to other players, just like the Overkill is, or like any person spamming a Fat Man. If you're spamming this thing at an event, just know you're blinding 90% of the people that are there with you. So many people hate on people that use this thing. It's very funny when you get called out for using this thing and you get yelled at just because you're spamming it at an event. But they're just mad because they can't complete the raid to get one of these bad boys. So enjoy flashbanging the entire lobby. Just know that when you're using this thing at an event, and if you're spamming it, you probably will be blocking the view of a lot of other people, and you may get some hateful messages. And then again, obviously, this next one is pretty obvious since it's a bloodied 2-shot grenade launcher. You'll probably be killing yourself pretty often if you're using this bad boy indoors. If you're outside, completely fine. Like if you're at eviction notice, or even if you're at radiation rumble, where there's like a good enough space that you could jump onto a higher area and then start shooting grenades from below or from above, excuse me, you'll be fine. But if you're running this thing indoors, I would be careful, and I suggest running power armor while using this indoors, like I said, just so then you give yourself a little bit of a higher chance to not become a kamikaze unit. And then the final negative that I could find with this weapon, again, in my opinion, if I missed any, let me know in the comments, would have to be the ammo economy. Don't get me wrong, you could get grenades pretty cheap and easy, but this thing just goes through ammo pretty fast, and the drop rates for more grenades from enemies' corpses are pretty low, so be prepared to constantly need to re-up on ammo. But honestly, like I said, grenades are cheap to craft. You can get a shit ton of them, and if you're ever low on ammo, you could just run like an expedition or a daily op and just hang out for a couple minutes, and boom, you'll have infinite ammo. But honestly, the amount of fun you'll have ragdolling frozen enemies is way more valuable than the cost of the ammo that you'll be spending to actually use this thing, at least in my opinion. If you are a lower level player, well, you probably won't have this because you won't be able to complete the raids unless you got carried through. But for some odd reason, if you are a lower level player, if you don't have too much stuff, but you have this weapon, I'll probably hold off on using this because you probably won't have too much ammo for it. Maybe pull it out on special occasions, or pull it out on an event to get more ammo for it if you can't craft anymore. But yeah, the ammo on this thing is pretty bad, unfortunately, just like it is with all of the 2-shot grenade launchers. Well, ladies and gents of the Wasteland, we made it to the end of another Fallout 76 video. As you can tell by the video, I love this weapon, and this is the best new launcher in the game by far. It's just so fun to use. It's really awesome. You really can use it to handle most content, and you can piss people off, but like I said, they'll get over it. It's that 2-shot bloodied launcher that's just insane. It has nice damage. It has an okay ammo economy. Not real. I mean, it's a negative that I could think of about it just because it's a launcher. But in terms of launchers, it's much more ammo efficient than a nuke launcher or even a missile launcher. It's just hard to come by if you're not a veteran player. But this is probably my favorite weapon that they've added with the new raids. It actually definitely is my favorite weapon that they've added with the new raids. But stick around for more videos covering those raid-specific weapons. Like I said, this one can be obtained from Stage 3 of the raid. Let me know what you guys think about the Resolve Breaker in the comments. And as always, I just want to thank you motherfuckers for watching this motherfucking video, and I will see you in the Wasteland, or maybe I won't because of the damn cryo fields that this thing produces.